Finally, EU, someone has figured out that when tech monopolies get huge scale, they take advantage of the supplier, not the consumer. This is the absolute right positioning. This is where platforms really get in trouble. When they vertically integrate and they compete against their suppliers. I'm not beating up on Amazon for their 1P business. Walmart was doing 1P for decades. What I'm saying is the third-party seller business. That is where Amazon takes advantage and squeezes the margins. EU and their antitrust case, which we have been waiting for. We have been waiting for years for this to happen. Frankly, I was close to launching a GoFundMe and I was going to pitch in, $100,000 and say, let's go raise $1 million and screw it. I'll sue Amazon because the DOJ doesn't know what they're doing. If you saw what we were talking about with the Google case that they launched against Google, I mean, it's a complete joke. These guys are, 5 years behind the ball and just not figuring it out. So finally, EU, someone has figured out that when tech monopolies get huge scale, they take advantage of the supplier, not the consumer. Finally, the EU has truffle hunted down that path and is launching a investigation against exactly that, saying that Amazon breached European antitrust rules by using independent sellers' data for its own benefit. This is the absolute right positioning. And the commission said Amazon was using the data of third-party sellers, such as order numbers, revenues, and number of visitors, to inform its strategic business decisions, like reducing the price of products. Also, Amazon's white label products. And data on the activity of third-party sellers should not be used for the benefit of Amazon when it acts as a competitor to these sellers. It's exactly right. This is where platforms really get in trouble. When they vertically integrate and they compete against their suppliers. When they vertically integrate and compete against their suppliers, this was actually some of the case with Microsoft. It had Internet Explorer, and it was giving Internet Explorer preferential treatment against the Netscapes of the world and the other browsers on Windows. And so that's actually what they got dinged for, was you vertically integrate and then you take advantage of other developers, in this case, third-party sellers. We've covered on the show, there's so many other things and transgressions that Amazon has taken out on third-party sellers, like product managers asking the seller to give them a purchase order. That purchase order contains who that seller is sourcing their product from, right? The product manager says, hey, seller, I need to see the purchase order because I need to see that your products are legit and genuine. And the product manager says, oh my God, look at this purchase order. Let me just go contact this manufacturer myself and just 1P it and just order from the seller. And now Amazon keeps the margin and I'm going to cut out the distributor or the third-party seller. That has happened countless times. That's not even what is here in this statement about what the EU is looking at, but I hope that stuff will come up as well. On Twitter, I was saying this is a great move. Finally the right direction. A common response is, well, hey, what's the difference? Like Walmart did this, right? There's no difference between this and Walmart. Now, here is the response. It actually is completely different than Walmart. Walmart was nowhere near as dominant as Amazon is today when it comes to looking at third-party sellers. Amazon controls over 70% of the 3P third-party sales in the United States. I'm sure it's a similar number, if not higher, in Europe with third-party sellers. Why does that matter? Because in antitrust law, it says, are you disadvantaging the customer? Third-party sellers are actually the customer of Amazon. I would actually argue that when it comes to third-party goods, marketplace goods, the customer is not even the consumer. It's actually only the seller, because Amazon's making its money by taking a percent of that transaction from the seller. Who's paying Amazon? It's actually the seller that's paying them 10, 15, 20% of the sale price, and that money is actually going to Amazon. So the money is actually coming from the third-party seller. So you think about who's paying Amazon, third-party seller. Who's the customer? Third-party seller. Why is that important? Because if you treat third-party sellers as a category of users, customers in this case, and you say, where can third-party sellers sell their goods online, right? Through other marketplaces. I think a common misconception of these third-party sellers is that these are massive brands that can readily sell through other channels besides marketplaces. That's not actually the case. Amazon itself has issued countless reports and studies showing, the average size of their sellers or small businesses, that Amazon is helping small businesses, that, they are creating, new business opportunities for entrepreneurs. And I mean, that's the whole ethos of how Amazon is branding. And if you look at their Q3 earnings release for 2020, they have a whole section in there that just talks about, look at this community we're building of third-party sellers. Look at, all these hundreds of thousands of sellers that are building their business on Amazon. Literally like what they're saying. The challenge is that those businesses can't readily go and sell into retail stores, right? Selling into retail stores is a whole other ball game. You need it's a completely different business. These are third-party sellers that have grown up selling online and selling through marketplaces. And that's its own category of business model. And so now if you look at the other marketplaces that are out there, who are they? Amazon, eBay, Wish, Walmart, Google, Target, we covered and doing much. And you say to yourself, okay, well, hey, Alex, you said Amazon's doing over 70% of 3P sales. How do you get to that number? This article puts Amazon at $200 billion in GMV. Amazon actually stopped regularly reporting their GMV numbers. Jeff Bezos disclosed the numbers for 2018 in his April letter of 2019, where he's saying, 56% of our sales are from third-party sellers. When you look at the other marketplaces that are out there and you try and add up their US GMV, it's difficult to do so. It's not readily available information. There's eBay. When you take out cars, this was actually something that the House Judiciary Report noted about eMarketer's numbers being wrong, because eMarketer was looking, the top marketplaces and actually giving Amazon less credit because they were factoring in like car, automobile, vehicle sales into, say, eBay's numbers, which is wrong. It's not apples to apples, right? Amazon's not selling cars. And the ticket size for those transactions is so big. So I peg eBay around $35 billion in US GMV when you take out automotive. Actually, I think majority of their GMV is international. US is the largest country, but it's still actually sub 50%, even if you include cars in that number. So I think eBay is around 30, 35. Wish is not disclosing their GMV, but I don't know. It's in the billions of GMV. They're valued at like $12 billion. So hard to say exactly. Maybe they're doing $5 billion in GMV. Walmart, another one, hard to peg. Maybe they're getting close to 10% in e-commerce sales on the $500 billion overall revenue number. Maybe Walmart is getting around $40 billion in revenue, e-commerce, maybe 50, maybe 20 billion or 25 billion of that is third-party sellers GMV. So maybe around 30 billion with a Walmart and a Wish. Maybe you got another 30, 35 billion from eBay. So, you're at 60, 65 billion. And then who else? You got Farfetch and The RealReal. They're each doing maybe $4 or $5 billion in GMV between the two of them. And again, that's not all just in the US. Farfetch is a big international business. So maybe it's a few $billion in the US. You have up and coming unicorns like StockX and Goat. They're supposed to be doing at least $1 billion in GMV each. I think most of that is in the US. So, maybe you throw all of those kind of luxury, like alternative good marketplaces together and you're $5 to $10 billion there. Maybe we're in the $70, $75 billion GMV range. And then it kind of starts to fall off pretty quickly. You put that all together, and I mean, Amazon was doing $270 billion in total throughput in 2018. And if you're saying that 56% of that was from third-party sellers, okay, now you're talking, call it 170, 175 billion third-party sales. We don't know what portion of that is from the US, but I think a big chunk of it is from the US. Now you say in 2019, you've got this $200 billion number. If Amazon's doing $150 billion in GMV in the United States, which I don't think is a far cry. Again, this is 2019 numbers. That's $200 billion in third-party sales in 2019 for Amazon. So it's somewhere right around there in terms of if they're doing around 150 billion in third-party sales, their numbers have skyrocketed now in 2020. These other sellers are around 75, let's say. I think that's actually pretty conservative, pretty generous estimates I'm giving to Walmart and some of these others. Amazon only crossed the 50% threshold, where 50% of their sales were from third-party sales in the past few years, right? Amazon's been doing this for 20 years, more. So Walmart has not been doing it for 20 years. And I think that probably Walmart GMV is probably maybe a third. I mean, I don't have anything to base that off, but if you look at the chart of where Amazon was and you try and overlay that with where Walmart is, I still think you have a lot of that is 1P sale from Walmart. Not a knock for Walmart. I think 75 billion in third-party sales, not on Amazon in the United States, is a extremely conservative number. And $150 billion in the trailing 12 months GMV for Amazon, don't think that's that far off either. Anyway, that gives you roughly a 70% Amazon demand with third-party sales. You can beat me up if you want because I don't have the hard numbers, but the hard numbers don't exist. So this is pretty much as good as it gets, unless you get the government going in there and like subpoenaing them for their financials and doing the split in the analysis themselves. Maybe the EU will go and do that. I don't know. I don't think you have to say that Amazon has 70% third-party sales for that market power argument to stand, but I do think it's somewhere around 70%. The reason why that's important is when you line that up and you look at Walmart's dominance in, say, the 90s when they were just on fire, they're nowhere near 70% dominance, right? If you look at who their suppliers were and who they were buying from, they're nowhere near that dominant, let alone, even close to 50% of having that much leverage over their sellers in their big box retail business. So I think it's a very different comparison. And Walmart did have a lot of leverage, and they would use that leverage to get, more bargaining power, cram down prices, get better kind of, payment rates and fulfillment terms and all these kinds of things. But again, the relative dominance is not even close when you look at this community of third-party sellers, right? I'm not beating up on Amazon for their 1P business. They have 1P. Walmart has 1P. Walmart was doing 1P for decades. What I'm saying is the third-party seller business. That is where Amazon takes advantage and squeezes the margins and raises the rates on them in the holidays and, cuts them out of transactions, takes their data and uses it for their white label products. That is where the EU is trying to preserve more competition. That is where the EU can curtail those aggressive, some nefarious activity by Amazon. You got thousands of people. You can't control all these people. Amazon says, hey, you're not allowed to look at this data. They have a policy, but then no one follows it and they look at the data. So what's Amazon going to do? Fire these people? This is the role of the regulator to say, well, if you don't follow these rules, there are real repercussions. And that's going to make Amazon really enforce these things, and it's going to make the employees really understand the boundaries. So it doesn't mean you break up Amazon. Breaking up AWS and Twitch from Amazon doesn't solve any of this. What this is saying is sellers and producers get taken advantage of by tech monopolies. How can you protect those producers, in this case, sellers, better? What are the protections? And we've talked about this in past episodes. What are the protections that you can put into place to protect sellers from the two biggest gripes that they have? One is being unfairly penalized by the platform, right? Getting kicked off the platform, getting suspended, having your relevance, your ratings, your reviews, dinged unfairly. The platform is one-sided. They don't listen to you. You can't even get anyone on the phone. They take unilateral action, and your businesses, your livelihood depends on Amazon. You're a seller, and you're screwed. That's number one, right? There's no recourse. Two sides to every story kind of thing, right? Uber drivers talk about this all the time. Second gripe of sellers and producers in general is pricing. I'm an Uber driver. You decide you're going to take 25% of the fee instead of 20. What can I do? Nothing. I'm Amazon, or I'm a seller on Amazon. It's the holidays. I'm doubling what it costs to put your stuff in my warehouse. Why? Because I can. I'm gonna 50%. I'm gonna 1.5x the take rate I take from your stuff in the holidays. Why? Because I can. You can't do anything. And they can destroy your margins. And now you got all this inventory, by the way, on your balance sheet because you're the seller. And what do you got to sell it. Otherwise, you can't pay it off. You've got float, you've got terms, and you're buying stuff on margin. And, you've got these sellers. Amazon's doing deals with Goldman Sachs to give these sellers debt. So those are the two biggest gripes: unfair kind of penalization, no rebuttal, no recourse, and the pricing. This whole other thing about pricing and raising prices, you could lump into that cutting sellers out of a transaction because you took their purchase order and single source the product from the seller's manufacturer directly. That's above any kind of tax. That's like 100% tax. It just disintermediate you altogether. So that would fall into that bucket. And I think, the EU will put other stuff into place around data controls and the people on the white label team and stronger Chinese walls. It makes sense. I don't think the risk here is breaking up Amazon. I just think it's better seller protection, which helps to level the playing field. Is that going to nuke Amazon's multiple? No. But it is going to make it harder for them to as predictably control their earnings results. And we'll see. This to me will be interesting to see how deep the EU goes. Do they touch the matchmaking, right? Do they touch the algorithm? This is what we were talking a lot about with Tim about Facebook, right? The algorithm, the matchmaking. It's one of the core functions of the platform business model. How does Amazon prioritize the results? Are they unfairly prioritizing their own listings over third-party seller listings? That's another form of a tax, right? We've seen Google Search do this. This is what I was hoping the DOJ would address with Google Search unfairly competing against other websites that Google has vertically integrated on. So Amazon favoring its own products in the search results. That's another thing. We will see how deep they go. But I think that matchmaking algorithm is also a big part of this. And now that Amazon is also in the advertising business, now they can say, well, I'm only going to show Amazon products first. And for any third-party sellers to get visibility, now you got to buy ads. There's some easier, lower-hanging fruit, and then there's some more complicated things, much more nuanced here around matchmaking. We'll see how deep they go, but this is the absolute right direction. This really does help do what antitrust laws are meant to do, right? It's like saying the government realized decades ago with AT&T and Ma Bell that it just didn't make sense to have 5 different telecom companies. And so what they said is, well, we are going to regulate your behavior and how you operate to make sure that your users aren't taken advantage of. Similarly here, who are the users that the platform monopoly takes advantage of? It's actually the sellers. And so how can you regulate understanding that platforms are inherently winner-take-all, modern monopolies? There's winner-take-all. How can you help make sure that even though you are only going to have one or two dominant players, that you help to make it a more fair, competitive environment for the users that have to use it because it is the only or one of the two only sources to build your business. In this case, being a third-party seller. So more to come on this. I give my credit to the EU. Miss Vestager, it took her a few tries to get this. Took a few stabs, took a couple wrong turns, but she got there eventually. Good for her. And I think they're on the right track. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.